Hi, and welcome to another episode of She Leads Biotech, the podcast where we celebrate the achievements of women in the life sciences. From a young woman who once thought she'd become a trial attorney to a scientist now building a stealth biotech company focused on neurological disease, my conversation with today's guest was such an honest look at what it really takes to survive and lead in biotech today. She spent almost 2 decades working across the gene therapy and neuroscience space, moving from academia into startups, where she's worn just about every hat imaginable, from clinical operations and development through to preclinical strategy, regulatory, manufacturing, and now company building. She's built a career around one thing: execution. What struck me most was how clearly she sees the gap between great science and successful companies. She talks openly about why promising therapies fail, not because the science doesn't work, but because companies aren't always built to execute, scale, or think far enough ahead. She speaks candidly about risk, leadership, imposter syndrome, advocating for yourself as a woman in biotech, and the moment she decided to stop waiting for a seat at the table and build her own. There's also something incredibly grounded about her. Despite working on some of the most advanced technologies in neuroscience and gene therapy, she brings everything back to people, patient, teams, and creating environments where talent and individuals feel heard and empowered to contribute. And now, with a stealth company already holding IP and preparing for fundraising, she's stepping into an entirely new chapter, one that I've no doubt we'll all be hearing much more about very soon. So please welcome co-founder and CEO, Dr. Jennifer Daly. Jennifer, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I am well. So where exactly am I speaking to you from?
I'm located up in Westchester, so just up the river from you in New York.
Well, listen, it's a pleasure. Thank you for joining us today. I was going through some bits and pieces about you, so I've got little bits of snippets that I want to talk about. Where did it all start for you? Because you've got a PhD in neuroscience. Was that something you always wanted to do, or somebody buy you a chemistry set, or what? What was the deal?
No, it's interesting. I actually thought for most of my young life that I would be a trial attorney. I
Okay.
was very obsessed with John Grisham books and thought for sure I was going to law school. And my high school AP biology class really changed all of that. That's where I discovered a love of biology in particular and science more broadly. And from there, it was a quick transition to a biology major and then a PhD in neuroscience. I didn't really know for a long time what it meant to be a scientist and professionally what that would look like. But I knew from, early on that science was of interest and an area I wanted to pursue.
Okay. So talk me through the early parts of your career. How did that progress?
Yeah, I think that my journey was perhaps a bit unique compared to some other scientists in terms of this breadth of experience that I've had the opportunity to discover that I don't think a lot of people get to experience. I started out in academia. After my PhD in neuroscience, I did a short postdoc, but I quickly realized that what motivates me is not just discovering new things, but discovering new treatments and really having a meaningful and tangible impact on patients' lives. So I left academia and started working as a clinical research associate, which was a lot of fun. I was able to learn the operational aspects of clinical trials. And then I moved into clinical development, which gave me a more strategic view of how these trials are designed and progressed forward. And then I moved back into preclinical development and got back to my research roots, so to speak. And from there, I was driving programs forward from early discovery, really from the bench to the clinic through pharmacology and toxicology in support of those clinical trials. And I've always
Wow.
worked in the small startup space, which I love and encourage anyone to do. So I had an opportunity to work in other functions like regulatory and manufacturing that, I may not have had the opportunity to do at a large company. So I've been able to wear a lot of different hats as part of my career journey.
That's always the great thing, isn't it, about the startups is if you've got that mentality that's like, I could put this hat on today and that on today, it really gives you a chance to do that. So you didn't do any stint in big pharma.
No, no, it's
Ah,
always been small companies, which is kind of funny. Several of those small companies were then acquired by big pharma, which is, I think, a nice position to be in that, we had these really successful small startups, but I love that culture. I love, getting in early where there's a lot of energy and excitement and a lot of work to be done. And, it's all hands on deck and you're really just jumping in and filling spots where you need to jump in. So
right.
that's really, I think, an area that appeals to me more than the big pharma role.
Okay, no, that's fair enough. And what was that transition like from academia into industry? Because I've spoken to a number of people who found it challenging. What was your experience?
Yeah, I think just because of my personality and the way that I work, it was a more natural fit for me. I have been in that experience at these companies where I've seen others struggle with that transition. But I think for me, I struggled more in academia. I'm very efficient. I'm very motivated. I'm very ambitious. I'm very, I ran cross country for a long time and it's the shortest point, between or the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. And that's very much how I feel about science. I see the goal, I see what we're trying to achieve, and I want to get there as efficiently and effectively as possible. So I think that just that personality and perspective is a more natural fit for industry versus my time in academia, where a lot of my colleagues were, wow, this is, really interesting. Let's look at this. Let's dive into this. And I'm like, this does not support my path to what I'm trying to achieve. So it's, a divergence of resources and time and energy that I wasn't interested in doing. So I think having that focus and kind of bigger picture clarity made that transition more natural for me.
So you kind of have this industry default button when you were at
I
academia.
think I do. I think that's why
Okay.
academia was actually the challenge. Where I was like, we need to move faster. We need to get this done. Like, I have a plan and I can't venture off course with this. It's just not the best use of my time, which isn't the right mindset when your goal is
But,
to publish papers and to,
right.
just do an abundance of work where I was like, I'd rather focus and have more meaningful and focused work.
So for our listeners we have a number of listeners that are in the sort of academia field at the moment, what would your advice be to them to be able to, what does industry look for that people in academia don't tend to show from the outset?
Yeah, I think one of the hardest things for people to accept or to transition to when they move into industry is this acceptance that there's going to be questions, there's going to be unknowns, there's going to be experiments that you could do. But if it doesn't add value to your program or to the overall package, then it's not going to be done. It's a waste of resources in that particular situation. And so you have to get really comfortable with there are things that I don't know, but I need to take that risk and move forward anyways. And I think that can be a challenge for scientists, understandably so.
They want to have all the answers,
Yes.
don't they? It doesn't always work like that. Yeah, no, I get that. So you've worked across the full development life cycle. How does that change the way that you think about programs?
Yeah, it's been, I think, really helpful to have worked across all of those because I get kind of this big picture view. I understand what the complete jigsaw puzzle looks like rather than only seeing the little pieces that, you typically see within your own function. And so I feel like I do have a good understanding of what is required early to support and enable these downstream, more advanced program aspects. And I think that's really important to be able to look outside your own function and understand that you're a piece of this puzzle and it all needs to be interconnected. It needs to really support all of these other activities that are going on.
So where do you think that great programs fall down?
I think that's an interesting question. And my experience has been primarily in gene therapy from graduate school through industry. That's the area that I've been in for almost 20 years now. And so I can speak, I think, a little bit more specifically to that field because we've seen a lot of change. We've seen the gene therapy field start, and become this really exciting, inspirational almost field and topic because it was this opportunity to potentially treat diseases at their root cause. We know that, this disease is caused by this missing gene. We can put back this gene and have this, really miraculous recovery or effect from that. But we've also seen this field have some challenges and setbacks. We started in the rare disease space, and this was primarily because this is, it's a very invasive therapy. It's a permanent therapy. It's expensive. And for many of the rare diseases, they're extremely detrimental. There's no treatments whatsoever for many of these genetic disorders. A lot of, times we were looking at pediatric disorders, so children that were dying very young. So there's an obvious unmet need for new treatment options. But then we started seeing these programs get canceled or discontinued or deprioritized at these companies. And it became very clear that the science alone is not enough. These programs weren't being canceled because the gene therapy wasn't working. They were being deprioritized because these companies had other business interests and there wasn't the market potential or value for this gene therapy product.
That's the trouble,
really
isn't it?
Hard thing.
Yeah, rare diseases, for somebody who has one or a family member who's part of that, it is the most important thing on the planet, as it should
Absolutely.
be. But in the bigger scheme of things, when money's changing and awareness as well, I guess, if I'm pretty sure if there was an immediate neat way of genetically curing whatever form of cancer, there would immediately be much more awareness, which brings more money, which brings more investment, which brings a faster goal to cure, right? It's that challenge. Okay. So one of the things, and I was doing a little bit of research into you, something that you actually said about that the market won't fund hope, it'll fund plans. What did you mean by that? What does that mean to you?
I think that quote was in reference to my very strong, this is a hill I will die on any day, that companies will succeed or die based on their ability to execute. And early on, when companies are trying to raise money, you don't have a lot of data. You don't have a lot of tangible proof that this concept is going to be effective. But you have the scientific rationale, you have whatever you can gather. You're selling these investors on this potential of this therapy. But that's step one. Every step after that is how well can you execute that? And I think that's where companies can struggle or not succeed in areas where they should, where it's not the science, it's not the technology, it's their ability to move a product from the discovery labs, from the preclinical bench into the clinic and actually make this a marketable product. And I think that this is an area I feel very strongly about, that we need to be looking as company founders very early into what we're building, who we're building it for, who's going to be paying for this, and making sure that we've looked 5 years, 10 years down the road to make sure that this is a product that's going to fit into our healthcare system, rather than just saying, it's going to work, it's going to make a big difference. That's only step one.
What wasn't that I think back to sort of pre-COVID and during that kind of COVID heyday, gold rush kind of element. And there was a lot of money that was given on that kind of hope basis, right? And, deals being written on a napkin and saying, this is what's happening. And then, of course, people lost money because the data didn't support, when it came down to it, the data didn't support what needed to happen. And so then much more emphasis, quite rightly, I think, is then put on the data in order to make sure, as you say, that this is something that's going to be tangible and going to work. So I guess it's not a bad thing that the industry has kind of moved more to saying, well, prove it, then,
Yes.
oh yeah, that sounds like a great idea. And how romantic that we can maybe cure this and necessarily can't.
And I think it puts an onus on the team itself and the team that the company is building to make sure that the science may work. The science may be great, the data may be great, but it doesn't mean you've got the right team in place to move that forward. And I think that that's the companies I've been at that have been the most successful were CEOs that surrounded themselves with really talented and experienced people that could fill those gaps and move programs forward really effectively.
Right. Okay. So back probably towards the end of last year, I think, I remember seeing a post of yours recently where a book that you saw aligned with a process. It was almost like the planets aligned, where you decided it's time to move into something else. Tell me about that. What's that all about?
Today's episode is brought to you by CNA USA Executive Search. We support life sciences, biotech, medtech, and advanced therapies companies with search solutions built on credibility, deep networks, and an authentic approach to partnership. If you're hiring, planning ahead, or simply want to learn more about what we do, visit cnasearchusa.com. Now, on to today's conversation.
Yeah, I had been, in a position professionally for a while where I was thinking it'd be a great thing to maybe start a company or, to have kind of a little bit more ownership and voice in how we're moving some of these programs forward. And so at the end of last year, I kind of found myself in a place where I realized I didn't necessarily have the influence or the stake in a place that I, really thought I could. I wasn't able to affect change in a meaningful way. And so I think, a lot of women in particular recognize that feeling of being in a room where you have something valuable to contribute, but it's just not carrying the same weight that maybe it does for some of your male counterparts.
Okay.
And so instead of continuing to try to earn a seat at that table, I decided I was going to build my own table. And all of these cross-functional experiences that I've had in my professional career, I think really gave me that confidence and knowledge to start my own company. And I think having this broader view of drug development, actually how it actually works from start to finish, is a huge asset to this process. And it also helps that I'm very aware of what I don't know, and I'm very accepting of that. So, we talked about building the right team and why that's so important to being effective. And I think I found myself in a place where I have a really strong network of talented people that were supportive and willing to help, and was at the right time where I was ready to take that risk.
Okay. What can you tell us anything about it, or is it still very much in stealth mode?
It is very much in stealth mode, but I will share that, we're really excited about this. I have a fantastic partner that we have IP already. We have our license agreement we're finishing up. We're ready to move forward with fundraising, and our goal is to develop this platform technology all based around a single mechanism that can treat neurological diseases really at their root cause. So we're not looking at symptomatic treatments, but actually correcting the dysfunction in the brain and looking at this through different modalities. So we have a gene therapy is our intended first indication, followed by a small molecule and recombinant protein programs.
Okay. That didn't mean anything to me at all. I'm sure it does to lots of people out there. So are you're in the rare disease space, rare neurological diseases, or is it wider open than
No,
that?
so this is actually one of my first forays into the broader neurological disease market. So we do think that there's potential for it within the rare disease space, particularly once we get to the small molecule pipeline and that program. There are several rare diseases that I think are very applicable to that. The rare disease space is one that I've been in for my entire career.
Yep.
Been very close with the Angelman syndrome community in that research field as well since my graduate school days and have been fortunate enough to work at, I think, 3 different companies that are developing Angelman syndrome therapeutics. So I have the utmost respect and just willingness to want to do as much as I can for these communities that need new treatment options. So it's always on the burner, I'd say.
What is that disease that you've spoken about there?
Angelman syndrome. So
Yes.
it's a rare neurological disease. It's
Okay.
a single gene mutation, which makes it very attractive from a gene therapy perspective, which is
Yep.
what I did my graduate work in, and was also working at other companies such as Agilis, which is now part of PTC, that was working to develop my graduate work into an actual therapeutic. There's, I think, a lot of success in the Angelman community, and that it is a rare disease, but because it's had such a fierce advocacy group, that they've been able to really raise awareness, raise money, and fund a lot of the research themselves through their own work and groups, which is just, I think, a really phenomenal model for rare disease advocacy.
Yeah, that advocacy is so vital, isn't it, as to being able to move the needle forward. But you're initially going to be in a wider range of neurological areas. Yeah. Is that I mean, obviously there's quite a few that have been in the headlines recently with celebrities and things with, are those the sorts of diseases that you'll be working on, ALS and the dementia that Bruce Willis has and stuff like that?
Yes. So yeah, actually FTD, which is what Bruce Willis has, is one that I worked on at Prevail Therapeutics during my time there. So that's not, a completely new topic to me. We're also looking at like the neuropsychiatric disorders such as schizophrenia.
Yep.
I think that there's, an obvious unmet need there in terms of the cognitive and negative symptoms that are currently, untreated by any of the approved therapeutics. So there's, I think a wide range of potential indications.
We're going to see lots of exciting stuff from you coming forward in the future.
Yes, hopefully.
I look forward to it. I love being schooled in this, in these areas, because I know nothing about it, but it's always lovely to have that little bit more hope that there's somebody out there working on something that's going to change people's lives going forward. So well done to you. One thing I do want to go back to a bit, and obviously now that you've got your company in stealth mode, and no doubt it's going to build, it's going to grow, and you're going to bring in team members and have staff and all of those sorts of things, so that you don't have somebody feeling how you felt. What do you feel are the important steps, and you're a leader in a company, of creating that environment that everybody has that voice?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was speaking with one of the CEOs I had worked with previously, and she said, my first meeting with you, she's like, I don't even know if you remember this, but the first time we met, you told me, I have a lot of opinions. And I was like, I do. Yes, I do. And I like to be very upfront about that. I have no illusions that all of my opinions are correct or the only way to do it, but I do have a lot. And I do have been fortunate enough to be at companies that support that and encourage us to speak up for the most part, which is, I think, a really phenomenal place to be, especially early in your career, to feel empowered and supported to be able to contribute in these environments. And it's absolutely critical to me that anybody that comes into our company feels that same way. If we're hiring somebody, it's not because I need a body to do manual labor. I'm bringing somebody in because they have a brain, they have knowledge, they have experience, they have things to contribute to this program. That's what we need. And I think that that's absolutely important. I think as a leader, it's really a transition from being the person executing things well to being the person that's empowering your employees and enabling them to do their job and voice their thoughts and views and to really contribute in meaningful ways. That's, I think, kind of a shift between we're not doing it all ourselves as the CEO, we're hiring the right people that are going to support us and be part of that team. Yeah.
And each person has their piece of the pie that they own, so to speak, that comes together to make the whole recipe. And what sort of leader are you?
Well, I like to think that I'm, one that I'm open to what people are saying. As I said, I know what I don't know. I know that I do not know everything. And, I want to bring people in and I don't want to micromanage them.
Yep.
That's not what, that's not what why we're hiring these people. We're hiring them because they're talented,
Yep.
because they're capable. So I want to make sure that they feel that within their management of their function, that this is an area that they are trusted to do. I am bringing you in, I'm hiring you because I trust you to do your job, to do it well, and to be a part of this team. I do not have patience for people that can't bring others in a respectful and conducive way. And
Okay.
I think that we all need to we don't all have to agree, but we're all working towards one goal. We need to be rowing in the same direction to get to that goal.
And keeping that patient-centric mindset the whole time, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
So how do you make decisions on something when there's no clear right answer? What's your approach, bearing in mind that you kind of sitting at the head of it now?
Yeah, I think that having worked at some of these smaller companies before and working with CEOs that are very ambitious and very aware of the need to move programs forward quickly and get treatments to patients as quickly and safely as possible, I have a higher tolerance for risk. Maybe I'm a gambler at heart. I like to make that joke sometimes in my professional sphere. I do tend to be more comfortable with risk. And I think that in this field, you really have to accept that you have a certain amount of information and you have to be comfortable that that may be all the information you have. So what I try to do is make those decisions, but also work through mitigation strategies. So here's the decision we're making. But if this goes wrong, if this doesn't work the way we think, here are all these other alternative outcomes that we could be getting. Now, how do we build a support system for those so that if it doesn't go the way we hope, we're already positioned to pivot?
Do you go sort of worst case scenario and then
I'm a high anxiety person. I am always a worst case scenario person.
That's me. I totally do that. Like in any decision I make, it's like, okay, what's the worst that could happen? How am I going to deal with that? And then once I've dealt with it, then it's like, okay, now we can go back and figure things through because I know that I can already deal with whatever the worst thing is that's going to happen.
Exactly. It's like you figure out what are
Glad
the bad
not
things
just
that
me.
could happen. And then you build the plan so that if that happens, that's great. We've already planned for this. We already have, an alternative route and we already have things lined up so that we're not losing time, we're not losing money, and we're already ready to kick things off.
Yeah. We're on the same page with that. So coming up to the future of gene therapy, where do you see it going? Because it has so much potential. What do you see in its future for the next 5 years, say?
Yeah, I still believe very firmly that gene therapy has a bright future ahead of it. And I think that the last couple years have been a bit of an obstacle, a stumbling block for it. And I think part of that was really, we've learned a lot of information about gene therapy, about how better to administer it, how it should be better utilized, things like that. There have been safety concerns, which obviously are, sort of a black cloud over the field in general, but we understand and you can almost predict when those safety concerns will occur to a certain degree. And we know that there are very specific limitations to the number of total vector genomes that you can deliver into a patient. And so I think that it's really pushed the field to, I guess, discover and to continue advancing in other ways. So we're looking at, novel capsids, things that can detarget the liver, for example, or can cross the blood-brain barrier and specifically target the CNS. Other ways in terms of manufacturing that you can improve product quality, things that will ultimately result in a lower vector genomes being delivered without compromising or sacrificing efficacy. So I think we're still improving the field and learning a lot about it, but I do still see a lot of potential for it.
And certainly my own experiences with the CGT community is there's that want to do something, right? It's because it's either, well, we fix it and we do something about it, or we give up. It's, there's really only two ways to go about that. And the whole community, every time there's a challenge that hits it, it seems the whole community comes together. There's no egos. There's no, we must be first. It's like, oh, I know something that might help you with your something. And I think that's incredible in a community that really does seem to be, we're all going to work together to solve this because it's worth solving.
Yes, there's definitely a shared goal, a common goal in wanting gene therapy to succeed, wanting it to be safe, effective, and able to be utilized for so many of these single gene disorders that are really detrimental, and patients don't have other alternatives. So there is this significant unmet need that we're all, I think, collectively trying to work together to advance, because really it's one of those situations where rising tides float all boats sort of things, where, if a company can succeed and overcome the hurdle for their particular indication, that technology and knowledge can be, absolutely instrumental in helping others develop new therapies.
And it goes back to that patient-centric again, right? At the end of the day,
absolutely.
It cures the patient. Well, this has been fascinating. I've thoroughly enjoyed being schooled by you, Jennifer. Thank you so much.
Of course.
My final kind of ending to the session. What advice would you give to someone looking to build a career in biotech today? It's not for the faint of heart, right? I think that's probably fair to say. But what advice would you give to somebody?
Yeah, I think my biggest piece of advice is build your network. There is the saying, your network is your net worth, for a reason. Every job that I've had in industry, I've gotten because somebody at that company, when it came time to hire, they thought about me. They called me, reached out, texted me, emailed me, said, we have this opening. I think you'd be perfect. And more importantly, I actually want to work with you again. That is a huge compliment to myself that, I've been able to build this network of people that think I'm both capable and they want to work with me.
Yep.
What more could you ask for?
Oh, I know.
I know that finding a job in industry, and it's a challenging time right now. It's a really challenging job market, and having a network of talented people really makes things easier if you're going to them for advice or job opportunities, things like that. Mentioned to former colleagues and friends that I was interested in starting this company. I was kind of like, can I do this? Is this something I'm really capable of doing? Every person I talked to was, that's amazing. You're going to be fantastic. Let me know when you're hiring. I want to work with you.
Lovely.
And that, I think, it's so humbling and just really motivates me to continue down this path, because there's really great people that want to be a part of this journey.
Excellent.
And I think my second piece of advice would be to always remember that this is a business, and we're working with really great people. I've got people that have become really good friends that I met through work. But at the end of the day, especially early in your career, or really at any stage in your career, this is a business. Making sure that you're protecting yourself and you're not signing contracts without having a lawyer review them. You're not advocating, for yourself when you should be. Things like this, I think, are huge problems that you don't realize are problems until they're too late.
It's a problem.
Exactly. And so I think always making sure that you're documenting important conversations that are happening, keeping your records, being organized, and really making sure to advocate for yourself, especially in your, professional career, is, I think, a huge advantage.
And what about someone facing a pivot? What would you say to them?
I would say Godspeed. It is a very stressful and terrifying thing to do. And I would say, have confidence, reach out to your network for support. Don't be afraid to ask for, help when you need it. Don't let the little things that you didn't even think were going to be the huge problems, like building a website. I am not a technology efficient person at all, but I managed to build a website. I, had to go through review of IP and all the legal documents and contracts and all of this. And these were things that were very overwhelming, and you just have to remind yourself that you are capable of doing hard things, and this will all be worth it. And I highly recommend a supply of chocolate or
vodka.
My leftover Halloween candy wrappers that I have on my desk here. It's very stressful, but having, I think, the right support certainly makes it worth it.
And keep pushing away that imposter syndrome that comes creeping in.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, as women, we know firsthand how real that is. And I'm not sure if it ever goes away, but I think being able to remind yourself of everything that you are able to accomplish, that you have done up to this point, that you have this network that wants to support you. And at the end of the day, what's the worst that could happen?
That's it. Yeah. Go back to worst case scenario.
Exactly.
Never fails, never fails. Well, Jennifer, listen, thank you so much for the time you've given us this morning. I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. I wish you every success with the company. I can't wait until it's more public and I can go, I know her. She's been a guest. I'm just, the short time that I've known you and the short conversation that we've had, I can just see how driven you are, and you're just going to be a huge, huge success in what you're doing. So it's been a pleasure meeting you. And I look forward to the next chapter.
Yes, you and me both. Thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure. Take good care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Well, that's it for today. Thanks for joining me for this episode of She Leads Biotech. If today's story inspired you, subscribe, follow, and comment. Because when one woman's voice is heard, many more find theirs. Until next time, stay curious, stay courageous, and keep leading.